welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Lemar.
And we're thankful to have you back with us. This is our third? Fourth? I don't even know. We're losing track.
I've lost track of time.
Several episodes in. So thanks for coming back. Also, thanks for all your comments and feedback.
Yeah.
I got to shout out. Seeing a bunch of comments on the socials, on the Facebook, which I forget to check, by the way, because I'm not 85 years old. But I have seen some great comments there. And then on Instagram.
I got a lot of hate mail.
Did you?
A lot
already?
of hate
They already
mail.
hate you?
And physical mail, too, which in this day and age, you don't see a lot of that. But I'm getting letters at my home address.
Ooh, was it like the magazine murderer shit?
Yeah,
too?
like cut out of magazines.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Ooh, okay. Y'all be nice to Lemar. He's funny.
But,
Him.
We did ask for feedback, so fair is fair. Appreciate that. Mackenzie's getting all the positives. Yes. It's also, we're recording this on Halloween weekend, and you guys can't see it because this is a podcast, but I am wearing a fully functioning Optimus Prime costume. Took me hours and hours to make.
Super committed. Really comfortable to record it too, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming back. We're so happy to have you. We hope you keep listening, obviously. But today, it is Halloween weekend, but we're moving on into our November conversations. So we had to kind of come up with a plan. So what was our November plan?
So our original plan was that we were going to record an episode where we sort of compared and contrasted Inglourious Basterds versus Pulp Fiction. I guess not necessarily versus.
Which is like not a verse. Yeah, the real conversation was actually off mic is what it was. We were like, which one was kind of immediately popular and why, and how did that change, and how did, Pulp Fiction, like obviously a cult classic, become so popular? And that just became a really complicated conversation, to be honest. So
yeah, so we called an audible about 30 minutes ago. We decided, I think it just because we were sitting here and I was like, we missed an opportunity. And you said, what? And I went, Tarantino-vember. That you just push the words together. And you were like, well, we could just do that.
Yeah,
so here we are. Now we're just going to do 4 Tarantino films in November.
The entire schedule.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm super thrilled. I think it's a great idea. And I think I haven't heard it before. So I feel like
I'm sure we are not the
idea.
first movie podcast to have done this, but I Googled it. No one else has published it online. So as soon as we lock that trademark,
it's ours now. Bitches.
You should have gotten the rights. Sorry, y'all.
Sorry, not sorry. So that's the plan, Stan. We're going to do 4 Tarantino films in November. We're going to start with Inglourious Basterds today. We'll talk about Pulp Fiction next week. And then TBD on the next 2. I guess we could be open to feedback.
Yeah, send us some suggestions.
Send us some suggestions. I'd love to hear what else you want us to talk about. We're Tarantino fans, so we'll rewatch whatever you want. I do, I'm a big fan of Hateful Eight, as you well know, so I feel like we could work that one in. But
I think that's one of the most controversial, not controversial, divisive, I guess is the right word. If some people really hated Hateful Eight,
really?
No pun intended.
You said that to me before, too, and I just find that so weird.
It's a one that you really do have to do a rewatch of, I think, to fully appreciate it. But we're not talking about Hateful Eight today. I'm going on tangents. We promised we were going to try to keep today to an hour.
We promise. So we're gonna. But anyway, so I think we have our 3rd slot, is what I'm hearing though.
Yeah,
so fourth recommendation. We want to hear what you would like us to chat about.
Word.
Before we get going, what are we drinking today?
We are drinking a little bit of the bubbly, to quote Mr. Chris Jericho. That's a wrestling reference for the nerds out there that like wrestling. I don't think Mackenzie does, but so you're not going to get that.
Mackenzie,
but yeah, we're doing a little bit of the bubbly today because in Inglourious Basterds, there's copious amounts of champagne.
Copious amounts of champagne. And I'm like, what are we celebrating exactly? Anyway, won't get into that. But we thought it'd be a good opportunity for some bubbles. Shout out to the aspiring sommelier boyfriend who picked our bubbles today. Which, by the way, are quite a bit more bougie than I planned. And I was like, okay, we could have limited the budget here, but okay. Yeah. They're really nice. And no, I can't pronounce it. So I'll put it in the comments, though. It's very delicious.
How do you spell it?
It looks like Nicola Ferda something.
I think you nailed it. That's
I
pretty.
think that was really on point. Yeah. So anyway, cheers to that.
Cheers.
Let's get rolling.
Okay, we're stretching.
We're clicking.
There we go. You guys can't see this, but we did clink.
But we're clinking. So as you know, when you listen to this, there are spoilers, but we want to give you a quick refresher of the plot. We know some of you may not have seen Inglourious Basterds in a hot minute, so I want to do just a quick recap of what this whole thing is about. So It is the first year of Germany's occupation of France. Allied officer Lieutenant Aldo Rain assembles a team of Jewish soldiers to commit violent acts of retribution against the Nazis, including the taking of their scalps. Yikes. He and his men join forces with Brigitte von Hammersmark, a German actress and undercover agent, to bring down the leaders of the Third Reich. Their fates converge with theater owner Shoshana Dreyfus, who seeks to avenge the Nazis' execution of her family by Colonel Hans Landa. So
there's a lot going on in there, like every Tarantino film. Yeah. So you've got, I think, about 3 to 4 different storylines sort of intertwining in this one. I sort of wrote down, we start out with Hans Landa and Shoshana. We get into that right off the bat. Then you meet the Bastards, and you see how they're sort of heading to some, like a confrontation, a plan of sort of winning World War II in this alternate history that we've got in this film.
He loves those alternate histories, Tarantino does.
Yes, and this sort of led into, again, little tangent, but of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We get a little alternate history, and this sort of kicked that off of what if this happened. Think of that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Then you get Frederick Zoller and Shoshana's story of sort of like, I wouldn't call it a meet cute. We're going to get into, I'm really curious to get your thoughts when we get to that. And then we jump back to the Bastards, Bismarck. We meet a couple other new characters. And then finally, it all sort of comes together at the end with all of these characters converging to this theater later in the film. So before we dig deep, that's sort of like an overview of all the different plots going on. But before we dig deep into that, do you want to discuss kind of like the cast a little bit of this one, the characters? Yeah,
well, as per usual with Tarantino, it's an A-list rock star cast. It's crazy. You get this many of these people in one room in one film set. So a few of them, obviously Brad Pitt is Lieutenant Aldo. We'll talk a lot about his character, I'm sure. Very interesting guy.
I was reading up on this, and I was curious on rewatch of what he's snorting throughout the film. Like, he has this little box, and I was like, this is before cocaine. I know my cocaine history, and I feel like that's an 80s drug.
I also did some
you actually Google it?
Yep.
So what's he snorting there? Let him know.
It's actually snuff, which is a tobacco product, as we know. What we in the States see most is that people are actually dipping that and putting it inside their lip. And it actually was very common to snort it, to sniff it. And I mean, which makes sense. It's the name, snuff. It makes more sense that you would snuff it. So yeah, it is not cocaine. But so Brad Pitt with his box of snuff. Diane Kruger, who is brilliant as usual. She's Brigitte von Hammersmark playing an actress. Christoph Waltz, brilliant.
So I want to take a second on this, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but like reading up on it, supposedly Tarantino was close to sort of putting this one in the vault prior to it being made. He couldn't find the perfect actor to play this Hans Landa character. And it's a difficult character to play because on one side he's saying these terrible, offensive things, committing these horrible acts, but am I wrong to say that there are points in the movie where he is likable, where he makes you laugh?
He is super charming.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. His character, he is such a dichotomous character because he is very charming, but he is also lethal. And even while he's being charming, you know that. You are actively scared of him while he is charming you.
Yeah.
I think just such a testament to his performance. That is an incredible note to strike. And yeah, he's a very interesting character.
Yeah, so he's saying things like, oh, I can think like a Jew. And it's like, gee, I don't want to hear this. Right. And then 5 seconds later, he's giggling like a child uncontrollably. And you're like, okay, that's kind of funny. Just a lot going on there. I just thought it was worth calling out that this movie almost didn't get made because that's such a difficult character to cast. And Tarantino actually went to Germany to do a final casting call. And this was sort of the last shot. And Christoph Waltz walked into the room. And I think within 2 lines, he said, that's the guy. That's the one.
That's the one.
And if I asked you to guess what year Christoph Waltz started acting, what would be your guess? Because this film came out in 2009. When do you think he started acting?
I don't know this. I actually wanted to look into this, but I would guess I would guess 70s, 80s?
Yeah, 1977. And I mean, mostly obviously European. I think he did some stuff in England. Right. He did some stuff in Germany. And 2009, I think, is when he became sort of a household name, at least in the United States, which is crazy. 32 years, and he has this just defining role. Also, I mean, not to skip around, but Daniel Bruhl as well. Sort of this was a breakout role for him, and then he started popping up everywhere. So when we say A-list cast, at the time, I would venture to say they were relatively unknown. But then when you walk out of this and you're like, they're going to be stars.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were such a core cast that went so well together, but they have these really powerful independent performances that really highlight each of them as actors. So yeah, no, it's not at all surprising that they're coming out of this with a jump leap on their career as a result. So yeah, no, that's interesting. Daniel Bruhl as well. I didn't know that as much because I feel like you said, I feel like I've seen Daniel Bruhl in a ton of things, and especially anything with a German or an Austrian.
Right.
You know, plug in Daniel Bruhl.
He's the Austrian Danny Trejo.
Exactly.
You know,
He absolutely is. That's hilarious. He totally is. He doesn't say no to a movie. That's for damn sure. Just like Danny Trejo. Yeah. So no, that's such a good observation. I mean, with that in mind, Daniel Bruhl's in it as well. He plays Frederick Zoller.
Another controversial character where you're really not sure how to feel about him.
Oh, I know exactly how I feel about Frederick Zoller. So
is at the beginning he's this German, for lack of a better word, a German war hero, a Nazi war hero in their eyes.
Yeah.
This sniper who
which means he's super fucking garbage.
Killed a lot of people, a lot of Americans, and is sort of being praised. But then he's sort of this. He's flirting with Shoshana, and you're not really sure if it's legitimate or if he's just entitled, and that obviously plays out over the course of the film, and we'll dig deeper into that in a second. But who else do you want to touch on cast-wise? Who else do you want to shout out? So a couple
others. One you said just then, which was Shoshana, who is played by... I'm going to butcher her name, but I think it's Melanie Laurent. Her last name is Laurent. And so she's brilliant, plays Shoshana. Michael Fassbender, obviously, also great. He plays Lieutenant Archie Hickox. And then Sylvester Groth, I don't know if he's one that you would call out, but he's one that I called out.
Which one is Sylvester Groth?
He's Goebbels.
Okay.
Yeah, he's Goebbels. And he stands out to me for a couple of reasons. One, Joseph Goebbels is horrible. Also, I feel like I'm butchering his name, but I don't really care. He's garbage. But yeah, he's a horrifying character in history. And this is a very weird take on him as a person. So I thought that was interesting standout that I wanted to talk about. But also, he's in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is one of my favorite freaking movies. I love a Guy Ritchie movie. And he also plays like a really bad dude in that.
Okay,
so it's kind of his vibe.
He's got a type. I want to call out, I believe it's Martin Wuttke. Sorry again for pronunciation, but the guy who plays Adolf Hitler in this, because that is a role that I'm sure not a lot of folks in Hollywood would, or not just Hollywood. I mean, a lot of these actors are from Germany and from the other countries in Europe where this is based, but that's probably not a role that anyone wants to play. I always think of Taika Waititi having to play Adolf Hitler in Jojo Rabbit because no one else would touch it. So he was like, well, no one wanted to play a comedic Adolf Hitler. Right. So Waititi played him himself in his own movie.
Which, by the way, like nobody else could have done it anyway. So, right. But yeah, he does. You're right. He does do a really challenging role here. But I will say we don't see him as much. So it's interesting how uninvolved he is, really, because he's the target.
Right.
Yeah. But he does do a good job. But I actually thought he didn't look much like him. It was one of my thoughts.
When I looked at, I think I was on IMDb trying to find who it was, and I was just looking at the cast, not the cast, but like their actual IMDb pictures, and I didn't recognize him. I was like, none of these people are the person I'm thinking of, and then I clicked on, oh, there he is. Okay.
But like while I was watching it, I was like, I feel like they could have gotten somebody closer. But maybe it's the same thing. I didn't look into that, but maybe it's a similar thing of like people don't want to play Hitler because obviously he's Hitler.
I would also, and I mean, probably not a stretch to say that, especially I would assume German actors probably don't want to play Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. They're like, give me anyone else. Thank you so much.
It's got to be a New Zealand. Apparently New Zealanders, they're the only ones that get a kick out of playing Adolf Hitler. So maybe that's a big thing there in New Zealand.
Give Tycho a call. He'll help you out.
Yeah, I think we touched on pretty much everything that I had as far as the cast is concerned. I think we gave everybody sort of, their flowers, if you will, on all the big stuff. And you have other cameos and whatnot, but you have smaller roles. You got Eli Roth, who is like apparently buddy with Quentin Tarantino at this point. They're both huge cinephiles. Yeah. And so Tarantino actually appears on this horror series that Janelle and I are watching right now. And it's Eli Roth's History of Horror. But it's cool to see the two of them just sort of shooting the shit about these classic monster movies and terrifying tales that they love.
That's super cool.
Yeah. Let's, where do you want to go next, I guess?
My first note, I honestly do want to start with this, is the script. Well, for a couple reasons. I think it's beautifully structured. beautifully written. The flow is really natural and well done. From a storytelling, from a narrative perspective, it kind of gets tied up in a bow really by the end, but you have all these tendrils of it throughout that are, again, typical Tarantino, right? Like he's intertwining multiple stories, and it's hard to do that in a cohesive way, I think, to begin with, but much less with a really complicated and divisive topic like Nazi Germany, and World War II. And so I think he does a really good job of deftly handling the topic and using the characters in a way that informs the climate, but also, to your point earlier about Hans Landa's character, makes you empathetic of people you would not normally be.
Right.
You have to at least consider them. And I think that a lot of that comes back to just how it's written. It's, of course, performance-based. But I think that you can't overlook that the screenplay here is really well done. But the other point about the screenplay that just really stood out to me was the language of it all. There are multiple languages being interwoven throughout very naturally in the same scene, in the same sentence, from the same person's mouth. They're going from English to German to French, and they're going back and forth so deftly. And, I don't have an ear for accents. I'm not saying that. But it sounds to the untrained ear very natural.
Yes.
And it flows very well. And imagine how hard that must have been to write and then, of course, to perform. But this script took him 10 years.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, no wonder, know, when you dig into the film, you're kind of like, and you and I both did a rewatch. We've of course seen this a couple of times, but I sort of rewatched that with that in mind. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's another testament, I think, to how well it flows. You, on the first couple watches, don't really register it.
Yeah.
That the language is changing so quickly and easily and things like that. It doesn't stand out per se because it feels so natural.
And it figures into the plot as well. It's very intentional that there are multiple languages spoken in this. There's an entire scene that revolves around accents of the guy is aware that Archie Hickox is not actually a German soldier because he picks up on the accent in the way that he's speaking. So there's another sort of takeaway. And again, we're going to spoil the hell out of this film. If you've never seen it, please go watch it.
I don't know why they're still here, to be
just
honest.
because you're aware of that World War II happened will not spoil anything because it's a totally alternate history. So you will still enjoy this film. You get a different take on it. But it actually, I didn't pick up on this the first time I watched it, but on rewatch, did you notice the parallels between the very first scene where we see Shoshana and her family hiding under the floorboards, and Landa comes in to talk to the farmer there to try to find them, and he changes to English so that the people he knows are probably hiding in the house will not understand what's being said, because at that point, I believe they only speak French, her family.
Right.
In the very last scene, I guess maybe not the last scene, but in the finale, the climax, Shoshana, and I didn't pick up on this until I read it, so credit to, I believe it was What Culture. A lot of the stuff that I'm pulling today, I'll give credit to What Culture because, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
You're not just an encyclopedia of all of this?
No, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that these are all original ideas. Some are, but I'll give credit where it's due. And in the final scene, in the climax, Shoshana goes through all the effort of, I'm going to make a movie to show to the Nazis in this theater while they're burning to death. Yeah. So that's all part of her plan, the effort that it takes her to, we're going to make a movie. We're going to torture this guy to make the footage, all just to have a little slap in the face of these people that are burning alive, just a little added cherry on top. She films that in English.
Yeah.
And the point was, most of the Germans in there aren't going to understand what she's saying and why they're being punished. And it's like a mirror of at the beginning when she had no idea that the German soldiers were about to come in and shoot up the floorboards and kill her family. So it's interesting to see those mirror each other.
Well, I think it's critical to understand that, yes, exactly to your point, she did not speak English at the time that happened, or again, they would have escaped. They would have tried to do something sooner before they were killed. And so I think it's part of her vengeance throughout this story. This is really partially, again, a story of Shoshana's vengeance, that she goes and learns English. This is, I'm not going to ever be tricked by this again.
Yep.
This is what killed my family, not knowing these words. And it's as simple as that. I mean, it's as simple and more complicated, of course.
You just brought up great points about the screenplay and how much that language sort of figures in there. So I think, again, that's very intentional. Always, as you said, in Tarantino films, there's going to be these linking storylines. And I think this might be my favorite in terms of how everything comes together. We've seen Tarantino films where there's multiple stories happening in the same universe or in the same city, and they sort of interweave, and there's some crossover of characters and things like that. But I think this one, of just seeing how everything builds up to this final, it's crazy that the climax, what I would call it, it takes about 40 minutes. They all get to the theater, and there's still about 40 to 45 minutes left in the film.
Right.
And you have all these other stories play out and wrap up at the same time, and then you get kind of the little epilogue at the end.
Yeah, I totally agree that it has a really cohesive story. I kind of, throughout, it's kind of funny, I always think of like a braid, these tendrils of these like braids interweaving at the right time to make it, give you this beautiful image, this beautiful design. And I think that's so true of this story. Again, yeah, I think he weaves it together really, really well. And to your point, it is very long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a long film.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you tell me, especially the first couple times I didn't think anything of it.
All right.
And just on a rewatch, again, I noted the time going into the movie, and I thought, God, that's long. We're all crushed for time.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I have time for this. And but while you're watching it, you don't notice. At least I didn't. I didn't notice at all. I felt like the flow, the pacing was so on point that you get lost in this story.
Yeah, I think the chapters in this one are well spaced out. The first time that I watched it, I will say that the initial Frederick and Shoshana, that chapter where they're first meeting, and it's very dialogue heavy. It's just sort of them talking at the marquee and then them meeting for lunch. And then you get that scene of Hans Landa showing up, and then you get this very tense, does he know who she is? Does he not? You get that in there, but that one chapter did drag a bit for me the first time through. This time, with knowing where it's heading.
So basically, you don't like to listen to people talk, is what I'm hearing.
I don't like dialogue. I prefer the Transformers films, as I noted earlier in my costume. So I just give me a Transformers movie. There were no Transformers in this. It gets 0 stars.
He's like, you lose me when you start talking a lot. I just can't. I see, because to the contrary, I loved it.
Okay.
I thought that the tension in that scene is so palpable. And again, from the get-go, you know that this incredibly polite, courteous, formal man is being charming, is being a great house guest. You know what I mean? And he's sitting at the table and he's asking permission. And he has all the power. You know that immediately. Nobody needs to tell you that. It's a Nazi in a,
Right, what are you going to do?
World War II, right?
You can't say no, but he's pretending that he's giving you a choice.
You know exactly that this guy has total power over you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. And it's you can feel this tension and you can feel the other shoe about to drop, but it really contrasts with this person's charisma.
Yeah, part of me really wishes, I think it would have been maybe not more interesting, but maybe, I'm not really sure what word I'm looking for here, but I don't like that they have him at the end go full villain, talking about the Frederick Zoller character, of when she kicks him out of the projection booth, because he's doing his little cutesy thing, like, oh, I'm here to annoy you, blah, 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 I don't want to watch my Nazi movie, I'm not proud of what I did there, and you have a little bit of sympathy of this guy's just fighting for an army, fighting for a cause that he doesn't even know if he believes in, but he's just taking orders, and then he goes full villain and is like telling her, I've done everything and I deserve, I've earned the right to whatever. And I see Mackenzie's rolling her eyes. So
Super rolling my eyes. I hate him so much.
I didn't love that story decision because I thought it would be more compelling to have him be a character who is trying to do better, maybe. I know that's a really weird statement to make about a Nazi soldier, but to have him actually just be genuinely caring for this woman who's
human.
not,
To be a human.
and who's not responding to his advances. And I thought you could still have it play out the same way of them killing each other at the end and whatnot. But for me, when he flipped that switch and it was just like, oh, this whole thing's been a ruse, that kind of lost me a little bit.
It didn't for me, to be honest,
That's
because
fair.
I was like, this is so fucking on brand.
Yeah.
And maybe that is, I don't know, maybe that's being a woman.
The nice guy trope. The nice guy trope.
Maybe
yeah.
that's being a woman and being on the receiving end of advances that you don't want. And
I
this
hear you
guy
on that.
won't
Yeah.
fucking stop. And he doesn't take a hint and he thinks that it's cute and he thinks that it's funny and it's fucking not.
Yeah.
And she has shown you in every way possible that she gives 0 fucks about you.
Yeah.
You are an annoyance. You are, and not only we, of course, know why Shoshana on all these other levels doesn't like him, but as a woman, she's like, I'm just not that into you, bitch. Like, get away from me. You know what I mean? And he's just not getting it. And so it was it was both predictable and real.
Yeah.
That this person would shift.
Yeah.
That they would not finally know that they're not going to get what they want. Because this whole thing has been about him trying to get what he wants.
Yeah.
I'm going to worm my way in. I'm going to get her to like me. I'm going to do her a favor and host the screening here and all these things. All these things she didn't ask for, by the way. But I'm going to do all these things that are going to ingratiate her toward me. And then she's going to owe me.
Yeah.
I took you to dinner, right? You know, I did you this favor, right? It's so fucking on brand. And so I was just not at all surprised. I was like, okay, that train's never late. Yeah. Welcome, come on in. And he was it would have been compelling. I totally understand what you're saying, to dig into the humanity of somebody who is conflicted.
Yes.
I think that's a very interesting story to tell.
And I think they still do that. I'm not saying they did that. It was all lost. And actually, to be fair, after listening to you explain, I'm going to go ahead and switch sides and say that I was wrong. I'm going to do the scientific thing of saying, hey, new information has been uncovered, and I'm going to take Mackenzie's side. So I'm with you. I'm convinced.
When he realized he was just done. But to your point, though, I will say real quick about his conflict about what he was doing and watching himself on screen and all that. That's actually another thing that I thought was actually very telling about him caring a lot about his perceived heroism.
Yeah.
And he was being very vain in those moments. And to me, it was actually really validating of, he may act sort of conflicted and he may play the shy guy of, I just did what I was supposed to do. I just took orders.
Yeah.
And I just, I was successful almost by accident. I had a great position. I did, all these things. And he's being like just disingenuously humble.
Yeah.
And then when you see him watch himself on screen, you realize how much he cares, that he looks like a hero, that he does the right thing. He does a couple shots that you can tell he puts his head down and he's like, oh God.
Yeah, he's like shuddering.
He's like shuddering. Yeah. And I think, well, at least for me, it was about him not shooting the scene right. Not getting the angle right, not like looking good in that scene. And I read it completely as him being so vain, so obsessed with that performance, instead of, oh, I'm so conflicted at watching myself murder all these people.
Okay. That's not how I interpret it. I could see how you could interpret it that way. I don't know. I took it as him, yes, being kind of ashamed of what was happening, but I like that spin on it. I don't know that I agree 100%, but I do like that interpretation a lot. Okay, so we've spent a good amount of time on Frederick and Shoshana. There were also
Frederick we hate, in case that wasn't super clear. We hate Frederick.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel Bruhl.
I know, and I love him. Actually, that's just really quick. That was really hard for me because I love him as an actor. And again, I can't remember my first watch, but on this watch, I remember my affinity for Daniel Bruhl and his performances, and I was like, oh God, I hate this guy.
But, I mean, in this, he kills 20-something Americans, and then he goes on later in his career to break up the Avengers.
Oh, yes,
in Civil War. So
it really flows nicely, to be
I think
honest.
this is like the prequel.
This is a prequel, actually, yes. Thank you, Tarantino, for the Avengers prequel. We appreciate you.
So we spent a lot of time on those two. Do you want to talk about the Bastards a little bit?
Fuck yeah, I do.
Okay.
Who doesn't love the Bastards?
The namesake.
Let's just start there. They're just, it's the namesake of the story. Man, this is a band of misfits.
Yeah.
Is what this is.
Yeah.
And it is a band of misfits that I think you love, for, at least for me, from second one. I was just, I loved it.
Every time they are on screen are probably my favorite parts of the film. They're just very compelling. And again, they're not perfect characters. I wanted to shout this out because this is another thing that I didn't notice. But in the article I read, did you notice that after the shootout in the basement, when they're in the veterinarian's office and they're operating on her bullet wound, did you notice the dead dogs in the kennels?
I didn't.
So there was a scene where these Americans shot dogs to convince the veterinarian to operate. And then Tarantino realized, oh, people aren't going to like the quote-unquote good guys shooting dogs, so he took that out. But there are two dead dogs with bullet wounds.
God, because you know what? I would have walked the fuck out.
Yeah. So
100%.
talk about conflicted
I did not
characters.
know that. That is so because I actually watched all the deleted scenes. They don't even have it on the bonus features.
Oh wow! I wonder if they. I mean, the dogs are there. There are bullet wounded dogs
sure.
in the kennels.
Yeah.
So it's like, did they shoot it and just never release
did they
it?
shoot it?
Did they prep the scene as if that had happened, but they never got around to shooting that scene? Not really sure. But
if they shot it, they did not include it in the bonus features. I can tell you that.
So it's interesting that the good guys again are these folks who are scalping Nazis, taking, and again, it's Nazis. I'm not going to feel bad about that at all.
Fuck that.
But, they're beating people to death with baseball bats. They are kind of anti-heroes in that way of being very compelling and having a blast just murdering people. And throughout the film, I was like, how many are there supposed to be? There were, I think, 8 at the beginning, but then they pick up Stiglitz, who's like a defector. And then, Hickox joins.
We love Stiglitz, man. He's just like... He's like in the ranks murdering Nazis. And I mean, he's a legend inside the Nazi army. Like, I just love that. I literally in my notes, I have Hugo Stiglitz, hero, like in all caps. I was into it.
Yeah, and we had to get a Sam Jackson cameo in this movie some way, and you get him narrating the introduction to Stiglitz, so that's where we get our little Sam Jackson. I think he narrates a scene later on as well, but yeah, Stiglitz is a lot of fun, very violent, and I love his face during the entire bar sequence, the basement bar sequence, where he is just pissed off.
He is so enraged.
He's ready to kill.
He's like, just let me at him. Just let me kill them all. I am ready. And honestly, like, how much better would it have gone if he had? But when they introduced all the bastards, I was just the audience just cheering. I was just over here just clapping, like, love him, he's great. I will say, when they introduced the bear Jew, I expected more. There was such a lead
You weren't
up to
expecting
him.
Eli Roth to come down that tunnel with a baseball.
I was not expecting Eli Roth, which, like, no disrespect to Eli Roth. Like, he's a handsome man. He's, like, a buff guy. I'm not saying he's not buff, but, like, when you say the Bear Jew, you expect a big motherfucker to come out of that tunnel. And he wasn't that big, and like he has the bat, and he's scary looking, and he does all the things. He's scary, and he does some fucking damage. But man, I did not expect him.
The thing is, though, I think what they're trying to get across there is there's a scene, the very first time we see the Adolf Hitler character, where he's talking about this lore about the bastards of they're 8 people. How are they massacring our armies? And they actually talk about the legend of the Bear Jew there, and he's a golem. He's like a giant troll man with a bat. So I think the fact that it is just this normal looking dude, and if I have one slight against the Bear Jew character, it's that terrible Boston accent that Eli Roth is trying to do.
But also, of course, he's from fucking Boston. I have that note as well. I was like, yes, go Sox. I love it because he makes like a Red Sox reference. I don't know if you heard it. So I was all about it. I was like, of course he's from Boston. We love that. We love a Boston Jew. But also, it was not the best Boston accent. But I was still about it. I was still on board.
But no, hearing Eli Roth do that terrible, like, Teddy fucking Williams knocks it out of the pot. I'm like, come on, dude, this isn't The Departed. Like, and I love The Departed, but it's like he feels like an extra in that just didn't make the cut. But either way, do dig the Bear Jew.
But Teddy Williams is great, so I respect the line for sure.
Yeah. We get some random cameos in the Bastards. You got BJ Novak from The Office in there, who actually ends up surviving. I was in my head, I was counting how many of this might be the Tarantino movie with the highest death count of the main cast, because I think only about 3 main characters survive the film, and BJ Novak's one of them, and he's not really even a main character, but everyone else, it's kind of a bloodbath.
Yeah, he's a little bit ancillary, to be honest, but he gets these kind of key scenes. You know, he gets taken captive with Brad Pitt and all of that, and so he doesn't get the opportunity to stand out other than the fact that he's there.
Right.
And you're kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, I can't see him and not be like, oh, look, it's BJ.
It's Ryan
from The Office. Ryan from The Office.
It's like you want something bad to happen for how he treated Kelly.
For real, this fucking guy. Why did he survive? Kelly's going to be pissed.
So you have him, and I do not know the actor's name, but you got the guy from Freaks and Geeks in there. Only has a few pieces of dialogue, but he's there. I guess Archie Hickox isn't an official member of the Bastards, but he sort of joins the cause midway into the film. And again, one of the first times I remember seeing Michael Fassbender on film, and he had been around for a minute, but this was one of the first roles I remember seeing him in.
I think it's one of the ones that he kind of, like you said, just became more prominent. But I love his character.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I love how he's introduced. I love him and Michael Myers, by the way. Like, Mike Myers is freaking...
Mike, the guy from Halloween, or the guy that played Austin Powers?
Mike Austin Powers, sorry. Mike
Michael
Myers. Mike Myers, yeah, is his commanding officer.
Yes.
Or what have you in that first scene. Yeah. And he's made up, as is his style, but he's made up in such a way that it takes you a minute.
You're like, where do I know that guy from? He's got like a fake nose, I think.
Right. And you're like, wait a minute. And then I'm like, oh my God, of course it's you. But what I love about that scene is he's being such a fucking film nerd. Fassbender, Archie Hickox is being such a film nerd. He is like being so snobby, and he's talking about the history of German cinema and Pabst and all these people. And he sounds so snobby, and so does Mike Myers' character back to him. And I was like, this is what we sound like, but with shittier accents.
I was going to ask if he was your favorite character because he's a film critic. And again, everything that Tarantino does typically has a point. He doesn't put something in a film usually there's some kind of foreshadowing or a message there. And this film critic character, he's chosen to go infiltrate because they're going to a film premiere. So it would make sense that he can go in and talk cinema as his cover. And did you pick up on how he uses his knowledge of cinema to sort of deflect in the bar scene when they're asking him, hey, where's your accent from? Yeah. And he references a movie.
Yeah. He absolutely does. And in the region of that movie. Like, he's so adept at talking about that movie that he's like, this is regional Rheinstadt or whatever the hell it was. Yeah, he uses that knowledge to deflect. And he does, I think, a pretty good job where he does get the guy off the scent for a second or two.
He buys it. It seems.
He buys it enough where he's like, oh, okay, I guess I could sort of see that, you know, what have you. And I was an extra in that movie. Like, that was
he calls
my
out a
favorite
specific
part.
scene in the film.
I was in this scene. That was me. You saw me. And like, to just have that reference off the cuff to be able to kind of deflect and distract that guy. I thought that was so fun. He is one of my favorites. He always is one of my favorites in most things that he does. But I did think it was a really unique, interesting character. And I was so sad when he didn't make it.
Yeah.
Because how interesting would that have been to see them like try to go through that mission?
Yes. It was definitely a decision to introduce this character, give him this 10-ish minute sort of introduction dialogue heavy scene with Mike Myers of here's your mission, blah, blah, blah. Yes. He gets there. He's in it for maybe 15 minutes and then he's dead like everybody else.
You're so invested in him. And then he dies. And that was so hard for me to watch. But I was also like, well, you got to have a major hiccup.
It can't just go off without a hitch.
It can't just go off without a hitch. Not to mention, I just love that Aldo at the beginning of this whole scene is like, why didn't she tell you we're meeting in a fucking basement?
Yeah.
You know?
When you shouted out earlier Diane Kruger as Bridget von Hammersmark, I have in my notes, she basically ruins the entire mission single-handedly because she chooses this location of meeting in a basement. She's hanging out with Nazis when they get there and like befriending them. And like, granted, they're fans of hers, the actress. She leaves behind her napkin with her autograph on it. Like, she is the reason that this whole thing, all this stuff.
Shoes.
You know, the bastards have been picking apart the Nazi army to this point, and then Bridget comes in and just fucks it all up.
Yeah, I mean, she really does fuck up pretty bad.
I will say that even Tarantino hated that character so much that he made the decision that he was going to be the one to strangle her to death in her closing. So those are his hands. Those are not.
Well, I did know it was his hands, but I didn't know that was why.
Oh, I don't. That I'm just being sarcastic. I assume that's why. He's like, you know what? She really ruined my movie. I'm gonna strangle her myself.
Yeah.
Spinning off of that, we have a lot of tense scenes in this film. A lot of the typical dinner table tension. There's like 4 of these conversations in the film of people just sitting awkwardly having a conversation and you're not sure who knows what, but there's a lot of sort of a threat of violence at any given moment. Which one stands out the most to you of the bunch?
I mean, it's hard for it to not be that first one, the Christoph and the farmer, the family that's hiding, Shoshana's family. It's hard for it to not feel like that because, again, it's the first moment of that you really feel in the film. But yes, to your point, there are several more. The basement scene is one of them, for sure. Yeah. You just feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And also you're dealing with a bunch of drunk guys who are just like ready to go off at any moment for unrelated reasons. So that's definitely part of it. The other one, of course, is Bridget's scene with Christoph Waltz right after this when they are, of course, they're on to them. Because, again, they've fucked everything up at this point.
Yes.
Also, Lieutenant Aldo, I love you. Bless you. His Italian is bullshit.
Well,
His
so
Italian is nonsense. He's like, I speak the most Italian, so I'll be your escort. Yeah, you speak the most Italian with this ridiculous Tennessee accent.
yeah. But so without the entire plan falling apart, and R.I.P. in peace, Archie Hickox, but we wouldn't get their sort of like their Italian names and that delivery of them saying their names out loud multiple times to Hans Landa, and what were
that
the
he
three?
makes them. That he makes them say it over and over again. And if you're like a normal person who's not pretending to be somebody, aren't you just like, I'm not going to say it again. You know what I mean? Like if it were me, I'd be like, no, thank you.
So just to recap, in case you don't remember, the three names were Enzo Gorlami, and then we had Antonio Margaretti and Dominic De Coco. Those were the three Italian names, and that scene kills me. So R.I.P. in peace, Archie Hickox. But like we needed that in order to get this. So
we needed that moment of levity, to be fair. But also it was very much levity, but it was also enraging because I was like, you're not going to say Gorlami 12 times. You're going to be like, fuck you, I'm done here, sir. But it's another note of deference to this random crazy Nazi guy who has just literally laughed in your face, and you're just going to still appease him because he's the threat. And that's a subtle scene of feeling that tension and threat, but then it segues into, she just told him that she hurt herself trying to climb a mountain, which again, shitty, terrible story, gets grabbed, taken to this back room with him. Mm-hmm. That scene, it escalates quickly, but in the few, 30 seconds to a minute, whatever, where they're sitting there talking, it is incredibly tense. And you just actually don't know 100% which way it's going to go. Yeah. Is she going to be able to sell him on this, or is he convinced already? Mm-hmm. And it's a very Cinderella moment in the worst way. Of he grabs her shoe that she stupidly left at this scene, puts it on, and it fits like a glove. Yeah. So that's it. That she just signed her death certificate, and you see it, and then it implodes. But up to that moment, again, the courtesy, the chivalry, the charm of that scene.
He prides himself on being a detective. Yeah. He mentions that several times throughout it. Literally, he's carrying around Sherlock Holmes' pipe. Yeah. You're never really sure what he knows and what he doesn't know. But on this rewatch, I was really paying attention. And he's baiting people into saying silly things when she says the thing about the mountain climbing. Right. He looks at the cast and he's like, when were you climbing the mountain? Yesterday? Because that's a brand new cast. Right. And it's like, we already know that he knows. Yeah. But he's just fucking with people because he wants this feeling of superiority and cracking the case. And I really dig that about the character.
He wants you to know that he knows, he can see through your lie. And just through, again, to your point, those detective skills, those powers of observation. Yep. He can see the cast. And it's funny because he, like you said, he can't resist saying it. Yeah. But then he pulls back. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, I'm just messing with you, Fraulein, whatever he says. Yeah. And so you're letting her know that you know, because you want her to be scared.
That was going to be my follow-up, was in the cafe scene with Landa and Shoshana. Do you think he knows who she is at that point in time?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I don't. Try
to fill that.
No, it really is, because I haven't thought about it, honestly. I don't know for certain. I think it's plausible that he's suspicious. Yeah. I don't think that he knows for certain, maybe. But same thing, this is, I think, actually the mark of a great detective, right? They don't assume that they're right. They test the hypothesis. Yeah. They continue to observe. They continue to investigate.
And she's giving off body language as much as she's trying to conceal how terrified she is in that moment. We as the audience see it, how uncomfortable she is. So clearly I'm not going to call him the world's greatest detective, but that's what he's trying to be. Yeah. I think he has an idea. And the reason I ask that is because by the end of the film, he's kind of switched sides. He sees that Germany is losing the war. Yeah. And he's like, well, let me get my retirement plan together of like getting out of here. So he aids the bastards in finishing Hitler off, letting the war end. And he sort of has it all lined up. Right. So then when I look back at that scene with Trisha, I'm like, does he know that she's also planning something?
Back to the beginning too, though. Why did he let her go in the first place?
That scene's fascinating. You're right.
It is fascinating because, sure, of course, when he pulls a gun on her, he's at a very long range. It's very unlikely that he's going to hit her. But he could still start shooting, make her stumble, make her mess up. and then they can catch up with her. There's all kinds of things he could have done to catch her at that point. He could have sent people running after her. What's the likelihood that she can run forever and not be caught, right?
Yeah.
And she literally runs off into the sunset practically, and he lets her. Why? Why does he let her go? And I think that that's part of what makes him intriguing as a character and complicated as a character, because while he seemingly has no moral values, because again, to your point, he's going to flip the script at the end of the war, and he's done all these terrible, horrible things, and he feels no qualms, no moral quandary with any of that. But yet, he has a soft spot, either for her or for some people. Why?
Do you think it's a soft spot, or do you think he just loves the cat and mouse of it all? Because again, he's toying with these people in these conversations where he knows he has the upper hand and he has information. So maybe he just sees it as like another opportunity to chase down somebody else that he's got to catch.
I could see that to some degree. I think he definitely loves the cat and mouse, for sure. 100% agree with that.
No matter how many times we found Carmen Sandiego, she always went to another city, and we were happy to follow her. So it's like we didn't actually want to arrest her. We just wanted to catch up and then see her off to her next jet-setting location.
That's how she rolls. I think that's a Carmen Sandiego move, and he just wanted to do that here as well. Thanks, but I think that's part of it. I think he does love the cat and mouse.
Yeah.
If he has suspicions when he sees her, he doesn't immediately take action either.
He does the thing where he orders milk and makes a big deal of it because, again, she would remember that, and you see her tense up again at that. And I remember watching it the first time in theaters, and the entire audience had this little like tightening of all of their spines of just, oh, he knows he's doing this to mess with her. The only other thing that I wanted to call out about his sort of story arc and him being so quick to change sides is at the very beginning in the very first conversation. This is another example of how that first scene sort of mimics the climax or mirrors it in some way, where he's having this conversation with the farmer. He asks, do you know what my nickname is? And the farmer says, they call you the Jew Hunter. And he says, Hitler doesn't like his nicknames, but I love my nickname because, I've earned it and blah, blah. And puts like a lot of stock into, yes, I love the fact that people call me this because I'm so talented at, finding these people and hunting them down.
Right.
At the end of the film, when he's having the conversation with Rain and the little man, BJ Novak's character, didn't talk about that nickname at all, but he's having the conversation with them. Then they mention, they call you the Jew Hunter, and he says, oh, I despise that nickname. Like, he's already ready to flip sides before they even have the deal in place of just, no, I don't, I'm a detective. It just so happens that I'm hunting down Jewish people.
Yeah, I think he's very willing to, make situational moves.
Yep.
He's ready to flip the script if he needs to. And I think to your point, this Reich has enabled him to do this thing that he loves. So that's what he's going to do. And it doesn't really matter who's on the receiving end of that. And you find that he's ready to go do that somewhere else. And I also wonder, you don't get to see it play out, obviously, but I also wonder how much of that deal that he makes for himself is really what he gives any shit about. You know what I mean? Because he's like, I'm going to get this house and I'm going to go to Nantucket and I'm going to be a U.S. citizen and I'm going to have lots of money and all these things. And it's like, but who are you going to chase?
Right.
Who are you going to hunt?
Yeah.
This is a guy who can't stop doing that. And he's kind of going through these motions that make you think he cares about that, but he doesn't seem to really care about that.
Right.
Yeah. But before I want to make sure we do our due diligence in talking about the theater, the cinema, and what happens at the cinema.
Right.
I think, oh my God, this whole sequence is gorgeous, beautiful. The music is incredible.
Yeah.
David Bowie coming in.
That was the one thing that threw me this time through because, originally we were going to be comparing this in Pulp Fiction, and whereas, we'll talk about Pulp Fiction next week, but very traditional soundtrack, as opposed to this one, where it's a score for the most part of this original music, and you have sort of these rising sort of crescendos and things. But the one actual song that I think is in the film is that David Bowie, and for me, it felt out of place. I didn't love the use of it.
I thought it complemented the scene so well. I thought it was like, it's all starting to happen.
Yeah.
What I have a note earlier when I was watching it of like, everybody gonna blow up this theater. Like, everybody wants to blow up this theater.
Yeah.
And here we are at this moment of them all coming together. They all have these differing storylines. Like to your point of just this bow gets tied up in this beautiful way. And to me, that is this climactic moment of she is ready to do this.
Yeah.
She's getting gussied up for it.
She's got her Rocky training montage, but with makeup and lipstick. Makeup.
Also, I so related to her like shitty job of her putting on her makeup. While she's doing it, it looks like it's going to come out terrible. And I was like, this is me. Every time I put on eyeshadow, love this for me. But then, of course, it comes out great because it's a fucking movie. And I was like, this has never happens in real life, in case you were curious. When you just rub rouge on your face.
Oh, I know.
It doesn't look like, I know. We see you getting ready for Halloween. But yeah, no, I thought the sequence was so beautiful, and then the colors were really rich. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very interesting that she chose to wear red.
Yes.
And, obviously Nazis' flags are all over the fucking theater, which, what was it with the Nazis and their flags everywhere? It was obsessive.
Yeah.
And it's taken over her theater. And if for no other reason, I would think she would want to burn this theater to the ground.
Yeah. As Americans, though, I don't know that we're allowed to criticize flag waving because take a look around.
Yeah, but like also I think that's, I don't know. I think that's so excessive.
Yeah.
And it's excessive here, it's excessive there. But again, she chooses to wear this color that is predominant on this flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she really leans into it, and she looks very Aryan. Mm-hmm. Which I think is very interesting. Mm-hmm. She is already blonde. She was blonde before. It's not like that changed. But she looks very Aryan in the situation. And I think it's what kind of packs a punch a little bit, too, of she is this, wolf in the grass. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't expect her. She looks like them. She sounds like them. She's in this upper elite echelon giving this premiere, but she's going to be the one to take them out. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find it interesting that there are two different assassination plots going on at the same time, and neither one knows about the other.
I know.
Shoshana has no idea the bastards are planning theirs. They have. I'm surprised that there's not like a scene of them looking around the theater that's now on fire and being like, "What is going on? We didn't plan this."
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting that it all comes together, and Hitler is double dead by the end of this. Double dead.
He's super duper dead. Hey, we couldn't just kill him once. We gotta kill him twice. I actually love. So what I noticed in the sequence is that it's really her lighting the match.
Yes.
She gets to pull the trigger. She gets to light the match, so to speak. She pulls the trigger on Daniel Bruhl. That's a whole scene, obviously. She takes him out. He takes her out, but she gets to take him out, in all the best ways, I think. And she knows that she's under threat at this point. She knows that this is not going to end well for her no matter what. So I love that the way that she doubles down. I love that she gets to set the match, so to speak. And she gets this vengeance that is very directly tied to a thing that happened to her and her family, whereas the bastards are doing the Lord's work, no disrespect, but they don't have quite the same tie to this specific act as her, I think, in a very personal way that you get really invested in. So I was really excited for that to happen for her.
I would say that they do. I mean, we don't know if any of the bastards have lost family in this war or anything like that, but they do make it a point at the beginning to say they are specifically picking Jewish American soldiers. They want this army to have a stake in 100%. What's going to happen.
But I do think it's important to note the difference of American Jews who weren't under threat necessarily, although there were a couple, of course, there were Germans that defected, I'm not saying that, versus people who were invaded, who were attacked, whose families were directly killed. And I think she's just emblematic of that for me. Yeah. And I think it's really satisfying to see her get that moment. Yeah. And then, yes, of course, it's doubly satisfying to see the bastards also get their moment, you know, but it's not without significant loss.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, pretty much everyone is dead by the end of this. Yeah. The heroes, the villains. You have the most hated character probably in the film, aside from Hitler, I suppose. But the most hated main character survives. One of the major heroes survives, and then you got the side character, B.J. Novak. But that's sort of the only people that walk away from this movie relatively unscathed, except for the one guy who has the swastika in his forehead, which is kind of a scar, I guess. But a little bit of a scar. I also thought I was like, the sound in this theater must be fantastic because there are bullets going off in the sound booth. I feel like you would know the difference. She did it
during the shooting.
She intentionally does it, but then he also shoots her. And I guess, I'm just like, wow, the sound. I want to go to this theater, but you can't anymore because they blew it up. In 1942 or whatever year this was. What a loss. I'm not a historian. But there's not a lot else that I feel the need to call out in this one. It's a brilliant movie. I wanted to touch on really quick something that I noticed, and this was funny enough, I think this was my third watch of this film, but did you pick up on all the threes in the basement bar scene?
Yes, there were a lot of threes, and I empathize deeply with Hickox with his holding up three situation.
Yes.
I, for the listeners, can't hold up three the way that he held up three, and I don't know if I'm going to share this on the socials because it's real embarrassing. But
I think you have to now.
I think I have to now. I can't. It looks like a little bit like a claw. So I was kind of like, I literally would not be able to do that. I would have been better undercover because I would have had to do this.
Yeah, they should have sent you in.
They
As
should
the
have
film
sent me
critic,
in.
you know films
That's
too.
what I'm saying. I should have had an audition opportunity.
Yeah.
But no, I did notice that. And I thought it was like some personal humor there, but also so frustrating that's the thing
that gives him away. So he, and again, hopefully everyone listening to this has seen the movie, but he makes the wrong three hand signal. Maybe we'll share that on the social, the proper and improper German three. But leading up to that, the entire time they're in the basement, there's 5 or 6 other mentions of the number 3. Yeah. When they first show the original German soldiers that are in there playing sort of the 20 questions game, the guy stands up and he does sort of like a salute. I guess it's supposed to be an indigenous or Native American salute of whatever character he is. And when he does it, he holds out the German 3 in the salute. Then I forget what the character's name is that comes and interrogates them sort of down there. And he says, "Oh, to the best 3 Germans I know." Then he says,
so much foreshadowing.
33-year-old whiskey. And all this leads up to this guy.
Which is not a thing, by the way, in case you were curious. So no, I totally agree. There's a ton, to your point, you said it earlier. There's almost nothing in a script, in a directorial, feature of Quentin Tarantino's that doesn't have intention and foreshadowing, and again, very well written, very cohesive. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think the last thing that we go out on is maybe the best ending that you see in a lot of these films, but just in this way, it was one of my favorites of just this Nazi getting his comeuppance and Aldo Rain getting the opportunity to do what he's already done a couple of times. Yeah. We love what he's done already, but he gets to do it again and be like, hey,
you're not walking away from this.
You're not walking away from this. And I love that he's like, you're going to be shot for this, because that's a very German situation. Yeah. He's like, no, bitch, I'm going to get chewed out.
They'll yell at me. I've been chewed out before.
I've been chewed out. I can take the heat. I'm going to cut the shit out of your forehead. And I am not, and I'm going to go to bed happy. And I just love that he does it. And he's like, you might get your deal that you want to get, but your life is ruined. You're going to walk around every day.
Yep. Everyone's going to know where you came from.
Everyone's going to know where you came from. Yep. And you were so giddy to be a prisoner 2 minutes ago. And I just love that he's.
I like that quick, like, hey, cuff him. He just shoots the other guy. Yeah. He's like, what are you doing? We had a deal.
I know. He was so giddy, and now he's just shot down, and I love it. It's so satisfying. Even though, again, Christoph Waltz is an incredibly interesting character and an incredible performance, you're very happy to see him taking down a peg.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that's a bingo.
That's a bingo. Exactly.
Is that how you say it? That's a bingo?
We just say bingo.
Did you also pick up on the little, speaking of Pulp Fiction next week, did you pick up on the little phone cameo when they call in the deal? Mm-hmm. Who's on the other side of the line?
Oh, Harvey Keitel.
Yes. So we'll get more of him in Pulp Fiction and probably other Tarantino-vember films over the next few weeks. But yeah, I thought that was cool. Like, we got the voices of Sam Jackson and Harvey Keitel in here.
Players. I love that he has a little troupe. A little troupe of players that he likes to use over and over again, and they're different. They're similar, but they're different enough.
Right. The last cameo that I don't think we mentioned, aside from Tarantino's hands, is that he also cameos 2 other times in this as a getting scalped German Nazi. And then he plays an American soldier in the film within the film.
In the Ziller film,
He just wanted to play both sides, I guess. I don't know.
I guess he just wants to be in all the scenes, I think is what it is. And I get it. You made a movie. You earned it. That's fine. I think the overarching note for me is that I think this movie is an incredible film. Mm-hmm. It's Tarantino's 6th outing at this point. Mm-hmm. And he has built up a reputation by this point that I think that it was such a massive success immediately. Yeah. It was, you win it. Who doesn't like a movie about killing Nazis, first of all?
I would watch them every day of the week. First. That should be, how I do 31 films for October? Yeah. I would watch 31 Nazi killing movies.
Nazi
I don't know what
films.
month we would do
Pick
it.
Pick a month, any month, I'll do that.
Make sure it's a 31-day month so we can get in as many as possible.
100%. So I think the premise is great, but the construction is great, and the execution of it is pretty flawless. And I think, again, Tarantino has built up a reputation and a repertoire at this point that it was very easily accessible.
You know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting, and so people loved it. Right
Yes.
away, they loved it. And that was, we'll talk more about this next week, but that was one of my main points about this film versus Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. You know what you're getting into. You know that there's going to be some dialogue-heavy scenes, but that there's going to be a payoff.
Right.
And it doesn't feel, despite there being, as I said, 3 to 4 different tense dinner scenes or table scenes, it doesn't feel self-indulgent. There's some Tarantino films where there's these random one-off conversations that are kind of silly, and it's like things that people just shoot the shit about, just random conversations. This one, it feels...
It's all purposeful.
Yeah, everything is leading up, and every one of those scenes has this underlying tension about it that I love.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thanks for listening to us basically fangirl about Inglourious Bastards for an hour.
Is this anything but a 10 to you? Is this a perfect 10, or would you dock it points for anything? I guess if you got to slap a final rating on here.
I don't think I give anything a 10, first of all, because I'm just a dick. So I can't give it a 10. But yeah, I'd say it's a solid 9.
Okay.
You know, like it's an 8 or a 9. I mean, if I really had to go back and watch it again, I'm sure I could find flaws. I do find flaws, actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I find flaws in some of the spy stuff that we talked about, like the execution of that particular scene and stuff. I understand why we needed it as a plot device.
Right.
But do I think it's a realistic story in that context? Probably not.
Okay.
So yeah, probably like an 8. I love this movie. I think it's great.
Okay. Well, this is only, week 4 or so of this podcast, and so you will be the stickler judge, and I will be you can be the Russian judge, and I'll be the kind-hearted American, and I'm just going to give everything 10s. Maybe not everything 10s, but to me, there's very little for me to find wrong here, and I would say it's probably like a 9.8 for me.
Yeah.
There's like the marquee scene and the follow-up until Landa shows up. That's the only part of the movie that drags a little bit for me, but I love this flick.
Yeah, I think it's great. Well, like we said, thanks for listening, but also thanks for coming back again and again, and hopefully next week as well to hear us talk about Pulp Fiction, and then probably Hateful Eight after that, and then one more again. Reminder.
Do you want to tell them where they can actually reach us? Now we've got some socials, and we also have an email.
Got all the things. We are at We Drink and We Watch Things on all the socials, and it's exactly what it sounds like. And then we also have an email. If you want to send us these recommendations, please email us at We Drink and We Watch Things pod at gmail.com.
And stop sending physical hate mail to my house, please.
Stop sending hate mail to Lemar, okay? He's a nice guy. I know you can't tell yet, but you'll eventually figure it out. We love him.
Wonderful. So we will see y'all, or you'll see us, and nobody's going to see anybody. You'll hear from us in a week or so. But you'll hear from us soon. So now, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers. Cheers.